here's a video for the Reform supporters. Are you a Reform supporter? Do you love Tice and Farage? Why would you describe yourself as a Reform supporter in the UK politically? There can be only really one reason why you would say, I've got a lot of time for Tice and Farage. I'm rallying behind Reform this election. If we look at what Reform stand for, what is their shopfront? Well, on Question Time at their press conferences, they have described this general election as the immigration election, haven't they? So that's very much what they're going to market with. They want you, me, everyone to believe that immigration is the highest priority for UK households. Up and down the country, it's what we care about. That's their shopfront. So if you are a supporter of Tice and Farage, what I'm gleaning from that is that you too believe that immigration is of paramount concern. It is the highest priority for you. Forget the cost of living, forget the NHS, forget schools crumbling. Immigration, you see either as definitely a first priority, and those are way further down the list for you, or you see them as the root cause of other problems within those arenas that I mentioned. So let's talk about immigration, shall we? Why would you say that immigration is your top priority? There can be only three reasons, really. Three options for why you would think immigration is super, super important heading into the GE and outside of it. The first one is an illegitimate reason. You're just racist. You're happy to hold your hands up. You're happy to say, yeah, I hate foreigners. Always have, always will. It's just the way I was raised. My whole family were racists and sort of inherited it from them. And I can't be bothered to self-educate my way out of that blind hatred. So that's just me. So if that's you, fair enough for that being your shop front, your billboard that you take to market. But assuming you don't want to identify or out yourself as a racist, there can only be another two reasons. So that was the first option. There's three, right? Next two options. You think Britain is full. That's another one that gets wheeled out, isn't it? Britain is full. We can't handle any more immigrants. We had, 700,000 in 1 year, net migration figures. We can't handle any more. Britain is full. So let's talk about that, shall we? Britain is not full. Britain is actually 98% unbuilt on. Did you know that? 98% of the UK is not built on. So we have more than enough space to build houses, to build blocks of flats, apartments, new housing estates or whatever. So really, when you're angry at there being insufficient housing or the pressure that foreigners might put on the housing crisis, really what you're saying is that you're angry at shit governance. This is the fault of sequential governments, Tory governments, right-wing governments. Even if they're not Tory in Reform, they're still right-wing ideologically, right? And the people who vote right, or rightward, they tend to be older. So the people who reflect their concerns at a parliamentary level, they tend to look out for that demographic. And guess what? That demographic, the older people, they're the homeowners. And that's why sequential governments, both Tony Blair's New Labour government did this, but then also sequential Tory governments since then, like what they figured out was if we fail to build enough housing, if we don't really support house building in the UK, the supply will crunch. And then the houses that there are there that tend to be owned by older demographics, they will accumulate in value. And those people who tend to be the voters will get rich and they'll support us. They won't want to rock the apple cart sort of thing. So that's like when you're angry about UK housing and the pressure it puts on housing and the housing crisis when more and more immigrants come in, really what you're railing against is shit right-wing ideology. That's what you're angry about. So we've covered illegitimate concerns about immigration, which are, I'm just an outright racist. We've covered option number 2, which is Britain is full. We've established that it's not full. And actually, when you say that, really, you're angry at small c Conservatives failing to build sufficient housing. What could option 3 be, do you think? I suppose option 3 would be, I'm angry at the pressure that foreigners put on public services. You hear that a lot. I'm a Reform voter because we can't take any more. We're a hospitable nation, but we can't support any more immigrants because the NHS is overwhelmed, there's not enough spaces in my local school, etc., etc. So, here's my question to you guys regarding that. If your concern is public services, schools, hospitals, social care, why would you think that people like Richard Tice and Nigel Farage would be on your side about that? Do you think privately educated posh boys like Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, who are never touched by things like the NHS or a state school comprehensive because their kids go to private school, they've got Bupa coverage, and they're right-wingers, they're ideologically opposed to public services. Just look at the last 14 years of Conservative government. Have they looked out for public services in any capacity? No, they haven't. At every opportunity throughout the austerity years, and now as we, potentially if we went back into a new Tory administration, they would be looking to slash public services even further. And this goes right through from schools, hospitals, right up into the BBC. Anything that is publicly funded for the public's greater good, they are ideologically opposed to. So why would you trust them if that's your concern? Is I don't want more foreigners coming in because the public services are overwhelmed. Why in God's name would you believe that Reform, of all people, would care more about that than Labour, who are ideologically aligned with providing public services? Maybe there's a fourth option. Maybe it's a national security thing. Maybe it's if we don't get a hold of these immigration numbers, asylum seekers, refugees, undocumented migrants of fighting age, if we don't get a hold on this, God knows who's going to come in. And they could strap on a vest and they could do God knows what on the underground or the bus. It could be 7-7 all over again. Maybe that's your vibe. You fear foreigners coming across for national security reasons. But wouldn't it make more sense to assess those individuals in actual asylum processing centres in Europe, in France, where people could make a request for a visa to come to the UK, and then in an embassy in France, in Greece, in Italy, in Morocco, wherever, they could go, look, okay, we've looked at it. Unfortunately, it's not wouldn't that make more sense? Rather than closing these things down, shutting these people out, forcing them into lorries and boats, and then when they do come across, they go underground. They're undocumented. How do you think they're going to end up getting radicalized once they arrive here? Do you think it's going to be if we give them a visa and then they're able to work? Or do you think it's when they get here, they're desperate and they start working for gangs and liaising with dodgy people and making shady connections? Which one of those do you think is going to land that person in greater risk of being radicalized? So when we say I'm a Reform supporter, I think they speak the most sense. Immigration is the number one priority. This is an immigration election. I'll be honest with you guys, I am puzzled because whatever avenue you go down, none of it makes sense to me.